Has America effectively abandoned Ukraine, and some would say Europe itself and NATO? Joining me now is Yevgenia Kravchuk. She's member of parliament in Ukraine. Joining me also from Washington is Edward Luce, the U.S. national editor for the Financial Times. Appreciate both of you joining us. Yevgenia, to you first. Is Ukraine feeling a sense of abandonment? United States effectively voting against a resolution that Ukraine moved calling for de-escalation of the conflict?
Well, we feel that we get a lot of news across the Atlantic every day. But honestly, tonight, I spent another night under the Russian drones attack. And it was after the American resolution was passed in the Security Council. Did it help? No. So basically, these resolutions do not really work, but at least when we pass these resolutions, the aggression has to be named.
But do you feel abandoned? Do you feel, let me be direct, do you feel under Trump that Donald Trump is moving closer and closer towards a Russian position and abandoning Ukraine, yes or no?
I feel that Ukraine, as it was 3 years ago, should rely on its own strengths, but also on some help from the partners.
Do you feel abandoned?
I will not answer that question.
Okay. Edward Luce, you can answer that. Do you feel that Europe, that the position of the United States increasingly under Donald Trump is a marked departure from Joe Biden, rather than align itself to European interests or Ukrainian interests? President Trump is looking to strike a deal with Russia.
Yes, and he's already begun negotiations with Russia, which Ukraine is not invited, nor is Europe. So, as the saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I feel therefore, because I'm able to, as an independent journalist, sort of state this clearly and be undiplomatic. This is a hinge moment. The world, has changed. The American president is now very much aligning with the predator here, Russia, and is himself in his own hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, increasingly acting like a predator. So this is a profound shock, not just to Ukraine, for which it's most consequential, but also for America's traditional European allies, who have had a very rude wake-up call.
And why? Well, let's be clear. What is it that President Trump is hoping to achieve by aligning in this manner, or trying to strike a deal with Russia at this moment? What is the end game? An end to the war, or with creating spheres of influence in different parts of the world? What is really, according to the end game here?
So, there are people around Trump who say, look, we've got to pivot to Asia. We have to prioritize the China competition. I'm not sure that fully explains Trump's actions. He's always had deep affinity for Putin, and a lot of contempt for international rules and multilateral institutions, of which, of course, the European Union and NATO are two of the most important. And so I think there's more to Trump's actions than simply spheres of interest. The deal that he has proposed to Zelensky, Ukraine's president, that America take $500 billion of Ukrainian resources, of its revenues from oil and gas and critical minerals and port fees. This is a sum of money that's more than triple the amount that America gave to Ukraine. It didn't at the time under Biden loan that to Ukraine. It gave it. Trump's now retrospectively saying, no, these were loans, and he's tripled their size. That is not the act of a friend. This is the act of a predator. And so, I think Ukraine sort of understands very well what's happened, but it cannot complain too loudly. It's in a very desperate situation.
Yevgenia, I know you don't want to comment on whether you feel abandoned, but are you hopeful that the war could end as a result? There are those who are saying that the war could end sooner rather than later, given the fact that President Trump seems determined to strike some kind of a deal with the Russians? Or will Ukraine continue to fight on?
I will answer your question. We're not children to be abandoned. We are a grown-up, a 40 million nation in the center of European continent. And so the 3 days to conquer Kiev is now 3 years. And actually, Putin is not fighting on his own. He has to drag the North Korean soldiers to Kursk region. He has to borrow shaheds from Iran. But actually, what lies ahead is the biggest discussion that we're having right now is the security guarantees. And by the way, the security guarantees are also connected to this deal that a colleague, independent journalist, I used to be a journalist, I could speak more freely at that time, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, President Zelensky had not agreed to any of the agreements that are not partnership. And actually, that's why these discussions are ongoing. But at the end of the day, I see there is a progress. And even yesterday, or was the day before yesterday, but President Trump wrote in his Truth Social account saying that something about economic partnership and not 500 billions, but like dozens of billions. So we're getting there. And I believe President Zelensky to be a good negotiator as well.
Final word from you, Ed Luce. Are we seeing the end game of the war itself? Do you see that the war could end before the summer, given the kind of determination that President Trump seems to have to push ahead with some kind of an early resolution?
Very keen on a deal. I mean, I think Putin, is still only got about a fifth of Ukraine. It's going to have a hard time presenting this to the Russian people, having lost or had wounded 800,000 Russian soldiers. He's going to have a hard time presenting this as victory. So when we hear about escalating drone attacks and missile attacks on Ukraine, there is still a reluctance by Russia to conclude, even if it's a frozen conflict, to conclude a ceasefire or stop fighting at this point. So Trump's going to have to bring out a little bit more of those famed negotiating art of the deal skills if he's going to get a settlement and peace within the next 3-4 months.
Okay. Ed Luce and Yevgenia there in Ukraine. I appreciate both of you joining me here on the show tonight. It's a fast developing situation. As I said, there will be always a Trump tracker in 2025.